Welcome to a Zeteo Live Town Hall. We are streaming live on Substack and on YouTube. I'm Mehdi Hasan, and I'm joined today by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of the great state of Minnesota. Thank you for joining us on the live stream. You're here. I do want to talk to you about, obviously, the huge story in the news, the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk. But you're here specifically because you are introducing a resolution today to do what?
A war powers resolution to make sure that we actually enforce the Constitution, which sets powers of separation. It is Congress that declares war, and we have not been given that authority by this president. And it's, I think, really important for us to insert our authority in declaring war. What we are seeing with multiple strikes throughout the world that the president has authorized is that he does not have the authority to be able to do so. And specifically, the strike that was carried out in the Caribbean against the Venezuelan vessel, I think it's important for the people to recognize that we cannot just go out and terminate people. This is not something that is allowed under international law, and is certainly not allowed under U.S. law.
Certainly, and the AUMF, the authorization for the use of military force for Iraq, I believe, was just rescinded in the House. That took decades. There is no authorization to blow up boats in the Caribbean 2,000 miles out from the U.S. shoreline, say they're an imminent threat, as Peter Hegseth and Donald Trump claimed. There were 11, just to remind people watching, there were 11 people on board this boat the White House says they killed. They claim they were drug traffickers. No evidence has been provided to show that they were drug traffickers. Even if they were, there's no death penalty for drug traffickers. You can't just kill people because you say they're drug traffickers. And the New York Times Congressman reports this week that the boat was turning around. So even if it was filled with narco-terrorists, as they claim, it wasn't a threat to the U.S. It wasn't even heading towards the U.S. when they were bombed repeatedly.
Yeah, I mean, that gets rid of the self-defense argument. We know that they don't have a clear justification in what they did, which is why they didn't come to Congress, which is why they haven't done a single briefing for members of Congress, especially those who have jurisdiction, whether it is the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Intel Committee, or Armed Services Committee. And that is because, one, as we've learned in the New York Times, the self-defense argument doesn't hold up. We know that they were turning that boat around. We know that our laws do not allow for us to strike people because they are designated as a terrorist. Yeah. We also know our laws do not allow us to strike people without any sort of justification. And so they don't really have any grounds to stand and when it comes to the actions that they took against the Venezuelans on the Caribbean.
So we know that they don't have any grounds, but your war powers resolution would clarify this, right? It would force the administration within 60 days to come to Congress and get a vote specifically on their power to do this?
Yes.
And it would restrict funding, right, if they don't get that vote, because Congress is supposed to control the purse. Even though he is the commander-in-chief, the president, he can't just willy-nilly declare war without Congress or go into military conflicts. And it's not just in the Caribbean, right? He's been bombing Somalia this year. No one ever talks about that, but there's been a record number of strikes in Somalia since he came to office. He's drone striked all over the place, both in his first term and now in his second term. He can't do that unless Congress turns a blind eye. Why is it so many of your colleagues turn a blind eye to these endless wars and to the president just bombing and assassinating whoever he likes?
I mean, the original authorization that was given to go after terrorists in Afghanistan has been a justification that we've seen presidents from Bush to Obama to Biden to Trump to carry out these drone attacks throughout the world. We have seen in many cases innocent people have been killed, and we haven't been held accountable for those deaths. The one thing that people, oftentimes will remember is the fact that Obama was the disastrous when it came to carrying out drone strikes and killing innocent people. But what they don't know is that Trump, in his first term, severely
Yes.
surpassed the number
Yes, he
of
did.
drone attacks and the number of innocent people that were being killed that the United States wasn't being held accountable for. And even now, in his second term, just in the last 8 months, there has been, dozens and dozens of people who have been killed,
Yeah.
not just in Somalia, but in other parts of the world as well. And again, right, like there are cases within the ICC, within the ICJ. I talk to families around the world all the time who have had their family members killed by the United States drones attacks, and we don't have a clear understanding to this
Yeah.
day on why these people have been murdered with our name and with our resources as taxpayers in the United States.
I assume Republican colleagues of yours in the House will not vote for this war powers resolution. How many of your Democratic colleagues do you think will get behind you?
I mean, there have been actually surprisingly some Republicans previously.
Like a couple.
Yes,
a couple, like Thomas Massey and occasionally MTG.
No, I've worked with Matt Gaetz.
Well, he's not in Congress anymore, is he?
He's not in Congress. But I know that people like Corey Mills and others have been interested, so that we might be able to get Republicans. But yes, as you are alluding to, there isn't going to be a huge coalition of Democrats that are going to be on board because unfortunately, this war machine that we have in this country has been supported in a bipartisan way. And many people, I think, because this is out of sight, out of mind, they don't really pay attention to the innocent lives that are being lost to the actions of our military.
If you are watching on Substack or YouTube, please feel free to stick your questions for Congresswoman Omar in the chat. On YouTube, Y asks, what is the meaning of international law if breaking it has no consequences? What's the point of the UN? I mean, we're talking about constraining the president within Congress, but international law doesn't seem to constrain him either.
No, I mean, and unfortunately, the United Nations has really not had an ability to carry out its mandate, right? To hold these international actors accountable when they are committing crimes against humanity, and that is partially because countries like the United States hold a lot of leverage when it comes to bodies within the UN that are supposed to hold them accountable. And we also know that there is a lot of weight against the sanctions that we can place on people. And so that kind of has eroded any sort of accountability that any state actor within the United States ever facing any sort of accountability.
Yes, the lack of accountability from Israel to the US is very clear right now. Let me ask you.
We provide the impunity that Israel operates.
Indeed.
Because we also, operate.
We give ourselves the same impunity to kill people in the middle of the Caribbean. I mean, this was not U.S. waters. This was not anywhere near 2,000 miles away, right? This was not just some boat approaching the Florida coast, which was taken out. It was a cold-blooded killing of people who may have been migrants, may not have even been drug traffickers. We have no idea. That's the whole point. On the subject of, I've got to ask, big story in the news right now, obviously, the biggest story in the US right now, the killing of Charlie Kirk, the conservative activist, provocateur, killed in Utah yesterday. What was your reaction when you heard that news yesterday?
It was really mortifying to hear the news, to see the video. All I could think about was his wife, his children. That image is going to live forever. My husband has known the daughters of Malcolm, and they have talked to him about, what being in person for their dad's execution meant to them. And
Malcolm X back in the 60s.
Malcolm X, yes. What that trauma has meant for them. And, decades later, they still carry that trauma. And so my heart does break for those babies.
Mahmoud Shah Ayub asks on Substack, are you concerned about your own safety?
Yeah, I mean, what this brings up, and other politically motivated assassinations bring up for public servants like myself and public officials, is the fact that we are in those kind of situations all the time. There isn't going to be enough security, enough screening to ever shield you. And that reality, especially when you are a parent, is mortifying, because not only do you want that kind of image to traumatize your children, you also don't want your children living in that fear of, my mom is a public servant, she might get killed and I have to live without her. And this is, a conversation I had to have with my kids yesterday. I'm someone who deals with lots of death threats, and who's had multiple people incarcerated because they threatened to assassinate me. It is a constant thing that we think about, we worry about, but we also know that our families actually think a lot more about it and are constantly concerned. I mean, this morning when I left for work, my that was the last thing my husband said to me: please be extra careful.
Yeah.
And it is, it's a deep concern. And a couple of months ago, one of my colleagues and mentors, the former speaker Melissa Herman, and her husband Mark, were assassinated in their home. My good friend John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were also shot at, but luckily survived. And in Minnesota, and so a lot of us who were on that list of that assassin, have have to live with the
Yeah.
idea of knowing that we got lucky, but our friends were not so lucky.
They were not. And you're right, it is a scary time. The number of texts I've received over the last 24 hours from people telling me, stop doing public events, get more security. The US right now is not a great place to live, especially if you're in the public eye, especially if you're doing politics or journalism, as you and I are. What happened to Charlie Kirk was horrific, inexcusable. Part of an American political culture that has become very violent. We've seen over the last 24 hours, Congresswoman, the right online, led by Elon Musk and Donald Trump in his televised address, they're saying, this is a left-wing problem. This is left-wing political violence. The left have demonized the right and incited violence against them. And it kind of airbrushes out, as you say, the threats against you. You've had multiple men over the years. I think in 2019, there was a guy who phoned your office threatening to kill you. They found bullets at his office. He went to prison. There was a guy from Florida a couple of years ago. I believe there's a guy in Connecticut right now being prosecuted. There's a lot of people. When I knew you were coming on today to talk about the War Powers Resolution, I actually thought, sadly, there is no more appropriate a Democratic guest than to talk about Charlie Kirk than you, because you were also on the kill list that this guy allegedly had this summer, who was obviously killed, the former Speaker of the Minnesota House and her husband, and injured two others. And I just think to myself, how cynical is it for big name figures on the right, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, many others, Nancy Mace yesterday, saying this is a Democratic Party problem, as if people like you are not getting death threats all the time, credible ones.
I mean, it's actually disgusting. And it reminds you that although these people pretend to be adults, that they are sometimes, they think a lot less than even children do, when it comes to compassion, when it comes to thoughtfulness, when it comes to being a leader. I did expect the president's address to the nation would have been a lot more compassionate filled. It would have been less partisan. He doesn't even know who the assassin is for him to say,
yes,
wing lunatic. I think it kind of denigrated his status and the status of the office he holds. But what I do know for sure is that Charlie was someone who once said, guns save lives. After a school shooting. Charlie was someone who was willing to debate and downplay the death of George Floyd in the hands of Minneapolis
I
police.
think he called him a scumbag.
Right, have no regard, downplay slavery and what Black people have gone through in this country by saying Juneteenth should never exist. And I think, you know, there are a lot of people who are out there talking about him just wanting to have a civil debate.
Complete rewriting of history.
Yeah, there is nothing more effed up, you know, like than to completely pretend that, you know, his words and actions have not been recorded and in existence for the last decade or so. And you know, you have people like Nancy Mace who constantly harass, you know, people that she finds inferior and wants them not to exist in this country or ever. And you know, you have people like Trump who has incited violence against people like me. And so, you know, these people are full of shit, and it's important for us to call them out while we feel anger and sadness and have, you know, empathy, which Charlie said no, it shouldn't exist because that's a newly created word or something. Like, I have empathy for his kids and his wife and what they're going through, because I do not want
no one should go through that, and we hold ourselves, I hope, to higher standards.
And we consider, you and I, as people of deep faith, and our faiths are based on grace and mercy, which is empathy. And we want, you know, like, for people not to dance on our grave, because that is not what our faith teaches us. We want to be able to mourn and pray for
but the problem is the politicizing is being done by politicizing is being done by the right. Like, this is always my problem when a public figure dies and people say you shouldn't say anything negative. I'm happy to not say anything negative and, you know, let the family mourn. But it's when everyone else tries to kind of do a whitewashing of who that person was. So obviously it was inexcusable to use violence against Charlie Kirk and to kill Charlie Kirk. No one supports the killing of anyone for their speech. But then the idea that Donald Trump now says Presidential Medal of Freedom, flags at half-mast, is the same Donald Trump who didn't even show up at the funeral for Representative Melissa Hortman, who was killed in the summer, and her husband didn't mocked Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, tried to blame him for the killing. Like, those kind of people, as you say, are full of shit, and we reserve the right to call them out, even at a time of tragedy and tension like this.
As a friend of Melissa and John, to me, what was the most painful thing was the fact that they were debating their character, that they were downplaying and
they were making jokes.
Yes.
I mean, Senator Mike Lee, the Republican from Utah, the state where this happened, was making jokes a couple of months ago about what happened in Minnesota.
Yeah, and in reality, you know, like, Melissa in her public life and in her private life was somebody who was the nicest person you would ever meet. And unlike Charlie, who wanted to bail out the person who went to go kill Paul Pelosi, and, you know, put him in the hospital and wanted to assassinate Nancy Pelosi for her political ideology. It just, I just want people to live in reality and understand where the problem is, and people who, you know, are carrying out these rhetorics that are causing harm and division in our country, and not come for those of us who are just trying to tell the truth about where we are and where we need to go.
We're running out of time. Michael Hernandez asked a good question on YouTube. He says, in this environment, why would you take away Secret Service protection from the former vice president? Trump happily pulled protection from Harris and I believe from people like John Bolton, who I'm not a fan of, but I don't want to see John Bolton killed. He's pulled protection from a lot of people he doesn't like. Doesn't sound like someone taking political violence that seriously when it's people he doesn't like.
No, I mean, and that's the thing. It's they are never willing or care to worry about when, you know, it's those of us on the other side of the aisle that are getting death threats, that have had their houses shot up, that have had, you know, people show up to their homes. They're willing to actually take away the security and the safety of people like VP Harris because they don't mind. They don't mind her getting killed. And that is the reality in which we are living in, and we have to continue to talk about Because unless we all collectively make a decision that this is not normal and that we are going to actually be civil, this is going to continue.
100%, and it is going to continue. I should point out, before we wrap up, there's an important comment here that we have. Let me pull it up. I just saw it in front of me. Oh, yes. Sean B., I'm just going to repeat what Sean B. says on YouTube in the comments. They keep saying it was politically motivated, but how do we know if they don't even know who the shooter was? Like, at least with Melissa Hortman and other instances, we know the guy was a Trump supporter. We know he was a right-wing crazy. In this case, we have no idea. It could be a left-winger, could be a right-winger, could be someone mentally ill. Who knows?
I mean, and that is important for Sean to realize, because when it comes to an attack, whether it is a school shooting or a shooting in a movie theater, or a politician gets shot up, they are quick to make the assumption of who the shooters are.
Yes.
While we sit there and try to talk about, solutions, try to talk about, the family.
Gun control. But nobody wants to talk about gun control.
Have a rational conversation. They want to point the finger because to them, they don't really care about the life that is lost. It's about who I can demonize.
Yes.
And that demonization is what leads to lives being taken. And I want them to realize that they can't continue to set the fires that end up consuming them and cry about it.
So I should point out, Mershad on Substack says the right-wing charges that left promotes this violence. It's pure projection. Trump's speech being an example. Agree with you, Mershad. Brittany says, for them to decry political violence when they are violently ripping families apart at home and abroad because of political nonsense, it's all theater to them. Well said, Brittany. I'm going to make this the last question to you, Congresswoman. Dr. Monica Joy Cross says, how do we fix this? This is a persistent problem. Are there answers?
The answer is not to allow the hateful rhetoric to find the audience that it finds. I mean, one of Charlie's last tweets that I read was a video clip of him. I think in that clip he talked about you and said, Muslims are like bringing an ideology and teaming up with trans and like socialists to bring about the end of Western civilization. Which, when you make a statement like that, then you are saying, find every Muslim you can find in this country and make sure that they are no longer a threat, which is calling for our extinction. And so it is important, and that, it had hundreds, millions of views on it. I think it is important for people to see that kind of rhetoric and say, no, this is not the kind of person that I want to follow. This is not the kind of person I want to platform. This is not the kind of person that should have this megaphone and give people who are trying to, build a country where we can have that perfect union that the founding fathers talked about. Uplift those people, uplift the ones that are calling for peace, uplift the ones that want families to remain united, uplift the ones that are not trying to demonize and dehumanize others.
100% agree. And I would just say one thing. I don't think we're going to solve the issue of political division or speech or incitement or hate overnight, but we could just restrict crazy people and hate-filled people's access to guns. We could restrict the number of weapons of war on the streets. And I if you really do care about the killing of Charlie Kirk, as many on the right say they do, I saw Glenn Beck and Megyn Kelly crying on air. I'm sure it's genuine tears. I'm sure he was a friend of theirs. But if you truly care about his death and killing, how about preventing future killings? There were multiple school shootings yesterday on the same day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Let's do something about the guns. But I suspect, Congresswoman, the Republican Party won't be joining you in that endeavor even now. And we will wait to see if they join you in your war powers resolution to see if they actually are against big government and executive tyranny and reclaiming power for Congress over war and peace. So I hope you keep us updated on the war powers resolution. We'd love to have you back to talk about that if it goes anywhere.
The optimist, so I will keep faith that people will end up doing the right thing.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you.